In this session of Real Powerful Talks, we'll be meeting with Joseph Vincuilla. Joseph began his journey here at Inner Strength by taking our 4 Pillars of Freedom teacher training. And since then, his whole life has shifted. Joseph, a lot of students inquire about Trikonasana, the triangle pose. When you're teaching on the yoga mat, what are some basic ideas physically about triangle pose that you would work with them? But also, what does triangle pose, or what could triangle pose represent on a deeper level, on a spiritual level?
It's also symbolic in nature as a triangle. Is energy efficient, each side is perfectly symmetrical to the others. This body itself is proportionate to itself, a micro and macrocosm almost. You know, there's the mind, there's the body, and there's the spirit, the essence, the trifecta there. There's like a chariot, which is represented as the body, the horse which guides that body, and there's also the driver in the background of that awareness. And the driver doesn't necessarily need the chariot or the horse, but the horse is necessary to drive the chariot. You need the will, which is the creative force of your life, but that driver, that background awareness that we confront the mind during practice, we rise it to the surface, confront it. You have to be stable in that trifecta. Each side needs the other to complete that perfect form. The stability, the ground, up, pointing upwards, representing that ascension, that growth upwards, as every foundation needs to begin from the ground up.
So when you're cueing triangle pose, for some of the audience that's watching these Real Powerful Talks, can you walk us through what you would do in triangle pose?
Yes, I would have you 45-degree angle the back foot, and typically a little tendency we have is not to really kick it back that far, but typically you want to have it so the inward thigh spiraling there, and then that transitions the energy into the front foot, and we also have a tendency to bring more power into the toes when you should basically have the padding of that foot so you can lift the toes even, if not. And I've been guilty of it before. Sometimes we want to rest in that right leg and hyperextend it, but the power begins when you engage the back of that knee, and then you can, if you want to take it deeper, lift that top arm and the bottom arm, and you really engage the core muscles. And you bring the shoulders back in alignment when you stack them, and then that's when it really gets into the interior development there. Well, the funny thing about yoga is I feel that even if you're coming for just physical or mental or to unclutter your mind, I think you get all 3 of those, even if you choose to knowingly do that or not. And I think we're spiritual beings having a human experience, not the opposite. And you know, the whole idea of the soul, I don't think we have a soul, but I think we are a soul, and we have a body. So we use the body as a platform and an instrument through the senses of experience, through the spiritual arena that you call life. And there are ups and downs, and they're inevitable. And yoga helps by seemingly seeking the discomfort to make the outside inevitable sufferings and discomforts a little easier to deal with as they come. Once you purify this vessel, it allows the mind to be clear, and the mind is the creative force of your life, as you are the architect of your own reality in life. So when those purifications come and you're able to let those energies flow freely through you, they move outwards and manifest through your life as well.
So is it safe to say the more that you practice and you actually show up on the mat, the more your practice will begin to show up for you off the mat?
Absolutely. And sometimes we tend to, take a few classes and feel great, and then we stop. But if you keep going, because the high road is, a lot of us can see it, but it's whether we choose to take it enough, and it's not difficult. We tend to be more afraid of how powerful we are than how inadequate.
I've experienced that in my own personal life. I hear you talk about dissolving fear through breathing. How is that possible?
Well, see, darkness isn't the opposite of light, but it's the absence of light. So when you look inside, you may not like what you're seeing because we've all faced traumas and fears, but to face those things, realize that every moment and every emotion, everything is illusory in the fact that it passes by. We tend to worry and fear of things that aren't even created yet, and then we create them by focusing our attention on those things, instead of building the thoughts that we should desire, instead of having the worries which seem illogical, and they tend to stem with our survival, our basic animalistic behavior of fight or flight, etc. But as Charles says, the individual divide dual. You can either be the most animalistic or the most divine in your choice through choosing. And usually it's the choice that people are afraid of, the detachment from their old habits and selves. But that's why Eastern philosophy focuses so much on attachment, and realizing the illusion and the nature of the attachment is what holds us back at times from taking the step to go towards that road.
You know, when I listen to you talk, it just brings me back to those moments when I'm on the mat and you're guiding me through this internal experience. What really stood out in what you just said was your focus. And I know that what we focus on, we feel. How can your focus in the world outside of your yoga mat, in your everyday life, your relationships, your profession, etc., how can your focus shift just by focusing your attention on your breath on the yoga mat?
Well, an experiment I like to take part in class is actually, I'll take them into warrior and I'll have them close their eyes and focus on their back finger instead of the one they're looking towards. And you can feel a shift in the energy simply by focusing your attention. And I tell them that it's not just within the body that this shift occurs. If you focus on your thoughts, and you have that streamline of consciousness, magic doesn't mean hocus pocus, pulling a rabbit out of hats. It's when you can take a thought and materialize it into your life, realizing that you are the architect, the director of your own experience here.
Yeah.
So when you're at those moments, confronting and bypassing those things as they arise to the mind, you can begin to use that horse of the chariot, as I was speaking to, as a guiding, creating force, with the driver passing through the mind's efforts to take you out of the challenge, using the Agni, the heat, to burn it away in that alchemical process of fanning those inner flames and then creating something brand new.
It's very interesting. I think that the physical body is conditioned at a very high level, and your focus is also being conditioned. One of the main reasons for these real powerful talks is to help the listener or the watcher, or the person watching this video right now, realize that they have the power to really focus their attention. Mm-hmm. Not only to focus their attention, but to make the most positive meaning out of what's happening in life. You've shared with me a few pivotal changes in your life. Mm-hmm. Without getting too specific, what brought you to those points?
It's like a guiding force within you to realize just what potential you have, potency. Realizing that the infinite is achievable, that there aren't barriers or perimeters holding you back from really manifesting anything. And when you realize that the things you may be stuck in, the cyclical nature of habitual behaviors, and the things you've been taught that may not even function or resonate with you any longer, then why would you not want to take the challenge of life and mastering your own life when you know it's a little more difficult? And it's a lot easier. That's why we tend to take those distractions and those other routes out.
Basically, because I'm on the yoga mat, you're on the yoga mat with us, you're studying yoga with us, you're able to talk to the experience on the yoga mat and make that connection with the experience out in the world. And that has a residue that stays with the student afterwards.
Absolutely. Because I have to come from a place of authenticity, or else I would just be lying to myself. And I feel that when you illuminate someone else's path, you see yours more clearly. So coming here, being able to facilitate change in others, as they're facilitating it in themselves, they're changing me. Because as we are all one, pretty much, a one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively, all reflections of one another. When you heal someone else, you're healing yourself. You're healing the whole, and you're facilitating change within them, which innately will exponentially help others as they go back out in the room, carrying that space they have forged in their practice and doing the real work on the real battlefield. You come into warriors, you're confronted by yourself in battle, and then you have more inventory, more tools to face the real challenges of life without, confronting them in such a harsh way.
It's really interesting when you talk about healing yourself. I've run up to some challenge with a lot of students saying, well, you know, doesn't health, if you're healing yourself, does that presuppose that I'm ill or I'm broken? What would you say to a student that may have that thought in their mind when they're listening or viewing these real powerful talks? When you say that you're healing yourself, and they may think that there's something wrong. I mean, where is the paradox, I guess, around that word? And
well, my belief about life is that it is a curriculum in education. And I like to use this metaphor a lot, but the seed that needs to be placed into the darkness and the soil for the gestation of that inner self, it needs to sift through those layers to go through the challenges and find itself back to the surface in the light where it thrives naturally. So life needs to have the polarity of the opposing forces so you can even recognize what good or bad is, even though, you know, it's just light and dark. There's just polarity in nature to kind of stress and test the inner self, to sculpt it, to cultivate it, and make it rise up to that surface through the polarity and the spectrum of emotions and the feelings that you have. Because without one, you wouldn't have the other, you wouldn't even be able to recognize it. So those challenges in life that we tend to either divert or not face are the ones that usually we need to face the deepest.
so healing isn't necessarily a dualistic approach where you have healing,
Correct.
or it's basically, you know, healing being an ongoing process of
Right.
that, as the metaphor you use, that seed constantly growing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
It's like as Charles has said before, when the higher you climb that ladder, the more it will sway. And I tend to say, you know, the better the view. But people tend to think the stronger you get, the less obstacles you may have to face, the less tests. But it's kind of opposing, because the more you can handle, the more that you will be given, but the more you'll also receive. The more you give, the more you actually receive in return. So,
Well, all of those things that you're saying right now, and excuse me for interjecting here, I just I have so much coming up that I want to share with the viewers. And basically what I hear you saying in class, what all of our leaders at Inner Strength offer, are these different perspectives. Not everyone looks at, just as you said, Charles Barone talks about, you know, the higher you go on the ladder, the more it sways. But you said, well, the higher I go, the better perspective. Not one perspective is to be adopted from all, but how is adopting new perspectives constantly helping a student off the yoga mat in life?
well, the only thing constant in this universe, if you will, is change. I mean, I can barely believe where I'm at compared to where I was years ago. I'm sure most people, but ascending is something natural in life. I mean, we have a different body every 7 years, you know, for instance. So you're always going to need to grow. You're never going to be in a stagnant area. You're never going to be perfect in utopia. You know, people set goals, but then when we reach them, you know, people may not feel fulfilled. They have to be grateful for the moments that they're in, to be alive, to enjoy it, not to set, let's say, you can set goals, but I wouldn't say to just want to get to a place where there's this lull and you're good to go. I mean, life is to be lived every moment, not just to achieve something and then rest, you know.